Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mental Health Mondays. I'm Nina Boski, and do I have a special guest for you? I have a wonderful psychotherapist. She's a best-selling author, and she knows a lot about addiction. And she is a woman on the move and helping people each and every day, not only in her practice, but in her own radio show, and doing a lot out in the world to help humanity at this wonderful time in history. So I want to welcome Dr. Foojan Zeine. Thank you for being here.
Of course, Nina, I love to be here. Great to be with you, and thank you for the invite.
Well, we run in the same circles in terms of that we know some of the same people, and we are both dedicated to making a very high impact, positive high impact in the world. And when we're talking Maryland, and you and I were talking, and we were saying, wow, some of the things that you're doing in the Maryland podcast, I'm doing each and every day in my work out in the field with people that are suffering from either mental illness, addiction, or both. What do you think is the biggest challenge in treating somebody with either mental illness, addiction, or both today?
I think there's a couple of things that we could look at. One is most of the patients who have any other illnesses, they are so eager to get treatment. They run to the doctors, they go through all the tests, they want their doctors to give them medication which is appropriate, and they follow the regimen of the medication in order to get better. When it comes to any of the mental disorders or addiction, which is again part of the mental disorders, what we see is that because the organ that is actually the decision maker is the one that at times it has the disease, it has the illness, then it doesn't necessarily make the right decision for themselves. One, two. I think that there's a stigma in there that is still there, although there's been so much of psych education, via media and all, but there's still this stigma that if there's something wrong with me mentally, then I'm useless, or nobody would accept me, or nobody would give me a job, or they would look at me as lesser than. And therefore, that is also part of why people kind of hesitate to go and take care of themselves. But also the third part is that it is difficult for them to recognize the illness, because again, it's the brain that is the organ that is supposed to do the distinctions and recognition, and the same organ is the one who is having the altered condition. So it's difficult for them to look at what's going on and what the effects are and how they're creating the effect, or how their illness is creating the effect.
It's the part of the brain that is the most difficult to try to not fool yourself with, right? Given the fact that you can be manipulative and lie to yourself during that time. And the other thing that I think happens when somebody has some type of addiction, and maybe it's not to the point where their life is completely fallen apart, but I heard somebody the other day talking about their own drinking issue. And he goes, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just got to snap out of it. And so given what you just said, there's no way somebody can just kind of snap out of it unless their brain gives, or do you want to speak to that? Because that just seems like really interesting. How would somebody snap out of it when your brain is, that part of the brain is what's being affected?
I think that in many aspects of psychotherapy, that people have not a chronic or an acute depression, but they have a psychological depression or anxiety, generalized anxiety, and many of the not very, very harsh illnesses that we can look at snap out of it. And the snap out of it on that term is more like you're kind of like putting yourself into certain belief systems that are not valid, and you've kind of gotten used to adhering to those. So, okay, now let's look at the belief systems and shake it up and snap out of those belief systems, and then acquire new belief systems, and life will go on much better. And this is most of what we do in psychotherapy, in relational therapies, in marital therapies, and so forth. That is very different than actual mental illness. I think mental illness is it's like you looking at it as someone who has a common cold and what they have to do with that, or they actually have a COVID-19 or something that they really need. They're going to fall into the hospital and be on a respirator. I think you can see that the continuum of this conversation. So yes, when somebody has an addiction to their brain chemistry has changed. They've changed, something changed. There's no longer, I can just do socialization of one drink here or smoke a little bit of joint and all will be well. Because it's more 10% of the addiction is really the usage. 90% of the concept of addiction is what your brain does to you yourself. It's the constant concept of, I want it, I want it, I want it now. This is the best for me. This is the only pleasure, the association of this is the only way I can exist. And this concept of it really pushes you to have 100% of your awake time and sometimes even your sleep time in this conversation. And you might not be using it all the time. I remember I used to smoke cigarette from age probably 13 all the way to like 38 or something. And I remember, Nina, I said, okay, I'm going to have one cigarette. Like I brought it down from one pack to one cigarette at 5 p.m. Nina, when I woke up, I thought about that one cigarette at 5 p.m. And I manipulated all the ways that I was going to get it even in between, but kind of like struggled and not in that until 5 when I had it. And it's like the first 2 to 3 puffs that are great, and then the rest is ugh. And then after that, I thought about that moment until I went to sleep. And then I dreamt about smoking. And then I woke up again. This is what a brain of an addict does. So you can see how the person's brain is manipulating them and lying to themselves, and then motivates them into totally a different way. And you do this also with everyone around you, so that's what you can see, the struggle that someone is going through. And then we talked also about like Marilyn Monroe with the borderline personality or the bipolar. And I think those are completely two also different things. With a personality disorder, Nina, this happens in such a young age that the trauma, the abuse, it happens in such a young age that your way of looking at the world becomes fixed and generalized. So that's how you look at the world at that moment, and relationships, and how you have this desire to connect. And I'm talking about borderline personality, this desire to connect and be attached, and then you're so afraid that they're going to dump you or reject you. And with her world, there was no family, so she was just rejected pretty
A
much from
lot of rejection from the time she was born. Even before she was born, her mother didn't want her. So there's a
exactly.
lot. Yeah.
So you are so afraid of a rejection that even somebody pulling their eyebrows out and saying, it would mean like that's the end of the world. So they would reject you, they would run away, all of that. I feel bad. I'm the one who nobody wants. So you can see now a 24-hour struggle about these type of belief systems of a pull and push and pull and push and pull and push.
So I want to ask you something, because this is important stuff. And for somebody that may be listening, they may know of somebody that is an addict, or they may be thinking themselves, oh my gosh, she's talking about me. This is what I do. Whether it be the mental illness aspect of it in terms of the borderline personality or the addiction part, how does somebody then get help if their brain is working against them?
The first part that I would actually request for people to look at is look at the results in your life, because that's what you look at. If what I have as a result in my life is, how the addiction is impacting my family system, my marriages, my relationships, my body, my work environment, that's what you can look at. If the way that outside world is, if I can look at and say, how am I creating also this result? And from there, I can go seek help to, at least from what I have control over, look at what behaviors, thought processes, emotions, or even chemicals in my brain I have to shift and I have some control over, to shift in order to create different results that I actually want. That would be where I would put the focus on for a person. Look at the result. If you don't like the result that you're creating, instead of saying I'm a victim of it and it's all everybody else's fault that I'm getting this result.
Bingo, bingo, you just said that. Victim. I'm a victim to my circumstance. So I want people to really hear that. If you're saying you're the product of the outside world instead of you taking responsibility, looking at your results shows that, hey, something's, gone awry here. And I've got to take back the power and control in my own life and responsibility. I love that, Foojan.
And and the only way we could do it is to look at where I have control. Because what's the point of living a life that I think I'm just, like this leaf that's on the wave, on the wave of the ocean, and it just takes me anywhere. I can be the one who's actually, pedaling and doing something that is in my control. So I can be empowered that I have some influence over my own life. And the point is that whether I acknowledge it or I don't, I do. The result is that I do because I'm the one who's making choices. Yes, my genetics comes with me, my outside circumstances come, and I don't have choices on those, but I have choices in how I deal with them, how I go about them, what do I do with them, and what are my intentions and how do I create my intentions and move forward. And for example, when you look at Marilyn, and I don't know much about her, but a little bit that I got from your podcast, it was more like, look at all the stuff that had happened to her genetically, which she had no choice.
Yeah,
All
very
that,
much so.
all that was upon her because of, the circumstances of family members and everything that she didn't have, and what she was taken as a child from one place to another. But look at the choices that she made. That yes, some were destructive and created the result of her death, but also the choices that she made, that she created an icon way beyond her years. Those were her choices, those were her abilities, those were how she created that ability and put it out there and worked hard for it to create it. And I think that's what people should really look at.
I think you're so right on about that because one of the themes of this podcast is resiliency, right? And even though at the time the way of treatment was very antiquated, so it was actually worsening her situation than helping her, hindering versus helping her, and it wasn't intentional. I think that her doctors, even though would have been probably brought up on charges today, I don't think their intention was to hurt her. I think their intention was to do, because that was what the treatment was at the time. And during the 1940s, 50s, and probably into the 60s, at least during the studio system, they were giving you B12 shots laced with barbiturates. So it certainly wasn't as healthy as we know now.
Remember at Freud's time, he was using cocaine and was giving cocaine to his patients because
Yeah,
obviously that was the thing then.
I know. So there's a lot of the mistreatment during that time period. There's a lot of mistreatment happening today, but you are one of those people that are actually helping people with their addictions, with their, psychology, with their lives. Tell us a little bit about your practice. You have a really wonderful book out, and talk to us a little bit about that as well.
Of course, I created a model which is called, it's a theory, psychological and educational theory and intervention called awareness integration model, which I took from everything that I actually learned in 30 years of, cognitive behavioral therapies, emotional therapies, behavioral therapies, psychosomatic and trauma-based therapies, and everything I ever used in my office, and kind of like combined them and created this kind of an efficient type of a model that we go in real, in and deep and out fast to clean up a lot of the stuff. So brings the awareness to the present moment, gives you an keys, actually tools in how to work with yourself, to look at simple steps of how to go clean up the past and then envision the future and move forward with action plans and how to get to the future, and kind of like live a flow and a fulfilling life based on your choices, and how to just be with what is and choose how you can be.
Interesting, because is it kind of an updated, more modern, more useful psychology model for therapists and for people to use in their lives compared to traditional therapy that has been much more? It sounds like you get people going faster.
Very much. with people such as, let's say, even that I've had with addiction or not personality disorders, but a lot of traumas in life, sometimes people go over 4 to 6 years, and we've had, based on our research, we've actually had them minimize their depression and anxiety and very much of a functional life within 20 to 30 sessions. And then I'm talking huge amount of trauma from
Oh,
childhood.
trauma.
But
Got it.
with people who don't have a lot of trauma, we've been very successful with 10 to 12 sessions, and I've called it like deep brief therapy because it's very deep, it cleans up a lot, and it's brief. And we've done a lot of different type of research. And one of the research we did when I was writing the book Life Reset, the awareness integration path to creating the life you want, because the book was written as a self-help, I took it with one of two of the professors in Cal State Long Beach. And in 4 classes, each one of them had 2 classes, but in 4 classes, about 132 students, we gave them only the modules of the book. This is only self-help, not even therapy. And we still minimized depression 67% and anxiety 43%. These are astonishing results, not
Well,
even with therapy.
and it's so needed right now because the number one thing that I hear as a coach as well is my anxiety is up. I just don't know how to deal with all this anxiety. And there's a lot of people running around with this anxiety. Where can they get the book and where can they find you?
Foojan.com, Foojan.com. All of the social media is there. My book is there. My book they can get in Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and they can even go through my site, and they'll take them to the actual publisher. Yeah, Foojan.com. And I'm all of the social medias are there for it, and my radio show is there, KMET 1490 AM, which is an ABC radio. And you were my guest, so that was wonderful to have you there. Yeah. So I love to
Oh,
connect with people.
and you do, and you're making an impact. And I think in today's world right now, we really do have to take a deeper look at ourselves, whether you have a mental health issue, whether it's depression, anxiety, or you have an addiction. I think all of us during this COVID time, it's a great time for reflection and taking a look at ourselves. And I want to really say thank you so much for joining us here on Mental Health Mondays, because you certainly are making an impact in mental health as well.
Thank you for having me.